Good morning, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Benton, and I'm delighted to be here for day 2 of my third Principles First Summit. I shared this Facebook post just a few days ago, and it's about everyone in this room and who isn't here, who is a part of this amazing growth and this wonderful program. Principles First is a group of courageous people dedicated to everything that is good. I am convinced that we can lock arms with people from diverse backgrounds and differing perspectives and seek to do what is just and good. We will fall short, but we will go with grace. As a Marylander, I am immensely honored to introduce to you former Lieutenant Governor Michael Steele from the great state of Maryland and current MS Now host of the weeknight. This insightful session will be moderated by Mr. Charlie Sykes, host of To the Contrary and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, to name just a few. Thank you.
Thank you. Charlie.
All right, Michael, how the hell did we get here? I mean,
Dude,
seriously.
I'm good. Hey, everybody, how's it going? Oh, wait, come on. I know it's early, but really.
Yeah, it's only 9:30.
Show a brother some love this early in the morning here in my state, great state of Maryland. Welcome, everybody.
All right, we're going to try to not lower people's moods because it's been kind of an interesting week. And so I want to talk about, Donald Trump's shitty week, the Supreme Court decision. I want to talk about how we deal with outrage, fatigue, and all of that. But could they just cut right to the chase? Because I think there's a debate that I've been sensing at this conference. And so I'm going to ask you this question.
Sure.
Is the worst past? I mean, we know all the problems Trump has had, the polls, the midterm elections, having to withdraw from Minneapolis with ICE, the tariff setback. So there's a lot of people who are chuffing the hopium and thinking that the worst is over, that we've turned the corner. What do you think?
No, we've not. Look, the reason you need to disabuse yourself of that idea is what happened in the wake of the Supreme Court decision. How did Donald Trump respond? He trashed the court, particularly the Republican members of the court, that two of whom he appointed. He then imposed, by fiat again, a global tariff, increased the global tariff. So no, we're not past, because when you're dealing with a child who's not been raised right, okay? When you're dealing with a child who's not been raised right, and we all know that kid in the neighborhood who you like to take and just say, I'm going to do something your mama and your daddy have failed to do, and that is whip your ass.
Oh, I think he's had that done.
Yeah.
I've heard.
There are a few stories. This is true, but look. So we can't lull ourselves, Charlie, into this idea that because the Supreme Court has handed down this decision, as I warned on our show on Friday, it's like, look, I get it. Everybody's thinks that this is a great slapdown for the president, and it was. But this Supreme Court still has other big decisions to make on civil rights and voting, et cetera. So let's rack up some more wins for democracy and the rule of law before we start down that yellow brick road of everything's okay.
Well, I mean, this is a perfect example of what happened on Friday. I think it was a very, very big deal. I think maybe we're at the beginning of the process of the court remembering who they are and what they're there for, this whole idea of separation of powers. This is something that Justice Scalia talked about all the time, saying that was the essential part of the U.S. Constitution. Mm-hmm. Other countries had a Bill of Rights, but our genius was the separation of powers, and apparently his argument has now won. You read Gorsuch's decision. And I do think that decision was a massive repudiation of Trumpism. And maybe it is the beginning of the shift of the court saying, okay, we really don't have kings.
Well, or the realization that their decision that said that Donald Trump could act with impunity is a bit too far in there now.
Buyer's remorse?
Buyer's remorse, trying to claw a little bit of that back. We'll see.
But here's I think the central problem, that we can be hopeful and say, okay, so the political winds have turned.
Right.
The court is standing up to him. Maybe Congress will stand up to him. Maybe at some point, yeah, exactly. The self-gelded Congress. I mean, basically, that's the message of the court. I mean, they slapped down Donald Trump, but they basically said to Congress, wake the fuck up. I mean, you're in the Constitution for a reason. But the real danger, I think, when answering the question of, is the worst past? The reality is the worse things go for Donald Trump, the more dangerous things can be.
Right.
Because there's nothing more dangerous than a cornered orange rabid ferret. And in fact, as his power slips away, as he becomes more desperate, I really do worry about the prospect of political violence. We're seeing a willingness to interfere in elections. I mean, as you point out, this is also the man. I mean, people, this is the sort of the alternative reality. Donald Trump has already tried to violently overthrow an election. So when we have these conversations, do we take him literally or seriously? I mean, really? We all saw January 6th. We know what he's capable. Now he controls the federal government. He's got his own private brute squads through ICE. He is the commander-in-chief of the military. He has gotten an entire political party to buy into his big lie about the election. So, like some of us in the room, some of the pundits might think, well, if he drops down to 32% popularity and there's a huge Democratic wave in November that, now the worst is past. I think that Donald Trump and his followers are capable of doing desperate things in desperate times, because these people are not going to give up power lightly or easily.
No, they're not, and I think that's the hardened reality that we all have to confront. At a certain level, we have to appreciate, I think, a very important aspect of the storylines. Donald Trump exists the way he does for two reasons. One, a Congress that is putrid in its response. They are maddeningly frustrating when dealing with, as you noted, their constitutional obligations, right? So whether it's, the idea that, maybe we should just tell the president he just can't misappropriate our monies, that we've appropriated the people's money, et cetera. Whatever that is, they're not in the game. So Congress is taking itself out. The second is a segment of the American population, the American people, who also feed into this. And that, in many respects, is much more a narrative about us as a country, how we see our neighbors, how we see each other. I mean, we saw, Charlie, the writing on the wall many years ago when people were complaining about going to grandma's house because they were sick and tired of being around grandma because she always talked about Trump, or she always talked about, some liberal. When the country started to politicize its relationship with its family, with its community, with each other, I think it put us on a very slippery slope. And so this idea of violence becomes a natural extension. Because, as you noted, when you are frustrated, when you're up against a wall, you lash out. And how we saw that manifest on January 6th is real. And we cannot disabuse ourselves of the idea that there are people, and I've actually had some even said to me in my face, well, just wait till the next Civil War. And I'm like, okay, which side you gonna be on? Because that's what we're going to have to confront at some point, I think, that reality, if this stays on the road that Donald Trump wants to keep it on.
I had a conversation yesterday with a retired member of the military whose name you would recognize, who was sort of breaking down this problem of violence. Mm-hmm. And essentially, long story short, there are probably 10 to 20,000 people in this country who are prepared to engage in political violence, who are prepared to take guns and to shoot people and to die. That is a huge number. I mean, think about, in Northern Ireland, there were maybe only 300 gunmen. We had 19 hijackers on September 11th. It only took one man to shoot, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand and start World War I. We have 10 to 20,000 people who are being whipped up by Donald Trump's rhetoric, which leads to, and I was going to get to this a little bit later, sort of like the challenges of standing up and fighting back. Look, the importance of nonviolence. Donald Trump wants violence. He has been trying to incite violence. He didn't get the kind of violence that he was thinking about, I think, in Minneapolis, or didn't play out the way that he thought. But I don't think that anyone should be under any illusions that if, in fact, there are violent protests, violent pushback, that this will play into the president's hand, and he will absolutely invoke the Insurrection Act. What do you think?
I think that's true. Look, that has been the end game from the beginning of this administration, was looking for a link, a way, an incident, an event that he could latch on to level up to the Insurrection Act, to level up to martial law. Folks, you know, I worked with Donald Trump back in the early teens, in 13, 14, on some business stuff related to politics. So he wanted to understand a little bit of politics, so he called me to sit down and talk, and we talked. And I walked away thinking, this man crazy as hell. There's no way this man should be involved in politics. But the one thing I learned in that brief time was Donald Trump will always tell you what he thinks. And there's a very simple reason for it, because he doesn't think you can stop him. That's why he brags about what he brags about, because who's going to stop me? So if I become president and I want to grift off the federal government and I want to make sure my kids make billions of dollars and I make billions of dollars, to hell with the Emoluments Clause, who's going to stop me? Supreme Court just sent down the word, you can't impose a tariff. What did Donald Trump do? Okay, I'm going to impose a different kind of tariff. I'm going to do it, right? So that feeds a lot of where Donald Trump comes from. It's this sense that he cannot be stopped. And a big part of that, when he gets to that corner, and a very good example of it is Lafayette Park. What happened in Lafayette Park, when you had General Milley in the uniform and they're all walking across the park together, and they're literally beating people, protesters, out of the way, because Donald Trump was to go and stand in front of Trinity Church and hold the Bible upside down. And that moment said a lot, because even in that moment, he was held back. He couldn't do all of what he wanted to do in that moment. And so this idea of being able to go after Americans that he does not like is not just retribution, it's personal for him. It's personal. It's a way he wants to exact punishment. He's going to stoke that violence. And he wants to use the levers of government to do it. So next month, you're going to have across the country the next No Kings rallies that are going to take place. And right now, there are already over 1,000 separate events that are being scheduled. They would like, right? And hopefully Americans will participate. But the thing that's the watchword there is violence. Because if they can turn one of those events into a violent event, then that gives justification for everything that they'd like to have happen before the November elections. Because the last thing Donald Trump wants is to look up to Capitol Hill and see Hakeem Jeffries with the gavel. And so they will do, and he will do anything. And they're telling you now, I mean, that was Georgia, Charlie. That was the raid for the ballots in Georgia. There are always these test cases, these little test case here and there. Minnesota was a test case on how violent, when it turns violent, what we can do, how ICE can move in and out of a community. And to your point, which is an important aspect of all of this, the way we respond as citizens matters. Because if we don't feed the beast, it starves. And that's what happened in Minnesota. We didn't feed the beast with violence, with a violent response, and it starved.
Let me pick up on this point, because Donald Trump, the way you describe Donald Trump, that Donald Trump thinks nobody can stop him, and I think that's been the story of the last year, right?
Right.
That he feels that, okay, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. Remember when he posted that meme of Napoleon, he who saves his country cannot break the law.
Right.
By the way, the young Republicans of Notre Dame put out a post yesterday quoting that, that the president cannot break the law and urging Donald Trump to defy the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, this is the younger generation of young Republicans. But the other thing, leaving aside violence for the moment, the great weapon of authoritarianism is hopelessness, right? Is that he is unstoppable, that resistance is completely futile. And I think this is the challenge to everybody in the room. And like some real talk here, nobody in this room is all right, right? No, I mean, we all put on kind of this brave face, but we're not all right because we're always thinking, am I losing my mind? And of course, what authoritarians want you to do is either become numb to the outrages, and Michael and I do this for a living, and it's hard keeping up with all of it. Like, what do we talk about today? So the challenge is not to be numbed and not to tune out, to say, to preserve my sanity. And let's be honest about it, a third, maybe to a half of Americans have made the not totally irrational decision saying, I can't take it, I can't take the insanity, I have to turn it off, I gotta stop talking to Grandma, I gotta stop listening to all of this stuff. But that's what they want. They want us to check out, they want us to be numbed. They want us to suffer from outrage fatigue. And literally everybody in this room knows exactly what I mean when I say outrage fatigue. And Michael and I, we get up every day and we go, okay, what are we going to be outraged about? There's like 1,000 things to do it. And we ask ourselves, I'm not going to put words in your mouth like, oh man, how long are we going to have to do this?
Yeah.
I mean, so how do you deal with outrage fatigue? How do you, navigate all of this? They've flooded the zone with shit. We are, up to our necks in the shit.
Uh-huh.
How do we respond? How do we stand up and endure in this?
I have conversations with a couple of really good friends that really help me deal with it. My friend Tito, my friend Jack Daniels, my friend, I have a friend from Bombay, and he.
Could I introduce you to Mr. Gummy?
Yeah, right. Mr. Gummy, so we all have our friends that we talk to.
They're not necessarily our friends.
They're not, not in the morning at least. I think that's such an important point. And so I look at all of this through the lens of, how much do I love my country? How much do I love my country? I mean, we are the wackiest, craziest experiment on the planet in the history of mankind. Not since, the king met in a cornfield with some rabid Englanders who forced him to sign the Magna Carta. Have we seen such a ragtag group of people from across the globe settle on a piece of earth and call it home? Why do we have a problem with that now?
We got bored with it.
We got bored with it. And I think a lot of it stems from the fact that we need to look ourselves in the eyes and realize we're not the greatest generation. We're not. In fact, we could be. We could be, thank you. But we're not. And so that's the work. That's the work. What are we handing on to the next generation about this country? This isn't the first generation that couldn't find a job. There was a little thing called the Depression. This isn't the first generation that fell on hard times. Y'all remember the 1970s and high interest rates? I remember passing out when gas went from 50 cents to $1. right? So these times are tough, but the resilience of America is its people. And so America is weak now because its people are weak. And we've been weakened by a man who never gave a shit about the country. He cared more about his bone spurs than serving the nation. And he denigrates that service. He denigrates that service. And it's not just the service of the men and women in uniform. It is the service of the men and women who are left at home to care for the country while they're out preserving peace. That's what we've lost sight of, Charlie. We've lost sight of who we are as a country and why this experiment matters to the world. There's a reason why our European allies are upset, not because, oh, America's, got a bad rogue president. It's because the American people are allowing this to happen on our watch.
Yeah, the 250th birthday of America. This is happening on our watch, and that's what I think that we need to constantly keep coming back to. This is happening in our name, and is this going to be our historical legacy? Or, is our historical legacy going to be, did you know what was happening in those warehouses? Did you know what was happening in those camps? And I'm not making a reference to the 1930s and the 1940s. I'm talking about right now. Do we know what's happening? We know what they do in public when there are cameras. We know what they do in broad daylight. What are they doing when no one was watching? And by the way, on a hopeful note, this question of how do you fight back? Don't despair. And I think that the rallies are important. But I think one of the most extraordinary things about 2026 has been the empowerment of every single American citizen with a phone and a camera in their pocket.
Yeah.
Think about the power. Think what a challenge that is to an authoritarian regime. And obviously what happened in Minnesota was a perfect example. Every single one of you has a phone in your pocket. Every single one of you has a camera. Every part of this resistance will be recorded. That's something they cannot stop. I think that Donald Trump and the Republicans in MAGA thought that social media was their future, was their weapon. It actually turned out to be their Achilles heel, didn't it? Because we actually saw what they were doing, and we can analyze it. How many of you listened to Joe Walsh yesterday? Okay?
Yeah,
He was kind of low energy. Is that right?
Right.
Joe has an interesting piece of advice, which I'm sure that he gave yesterday, that these videos have become incredibly powerful weapons of resistance. Send them to somebody. Take one or two videos and send it to one of your MAGA-adjacent friends or one of the people that is tied to check out. You can do this in your circle of influence, the 10 or 12 people that listen to you. Because when people see what's happening, all of the rest, I think, becomes clarified. Because to Michael's point, who are we as a nation? And I have these dark moments when I think, okay, the American electorate has completely disgraced itself. On the other hand, when you get out in the world, when you're not on Twitter or something like that, there's a fundamental decency among Americans. There's a fundamental sense of fairness and humanity, even among the evangelical churches who think that Donald Trump is God's anointed, which I have such a hard time saying, is much less understanding. But for these people, these images, these are important things. So in terms of what is the reaction? What are the weapons of the resistance? The most important weapon you have right now is to be able to record that, as well as your own conscience. So let's talk about, you used to be the chairman of the Republican Party, Michael. Now, we don't have enough time to go with what happened.
That's when I first met my friend Tito.
Yeah. You and I were at a meeting the other day, and what I was struck by was, what's happening right now, I think is a repudiation of many conservative values.
Oh, yeah.
It is a repudiation of fiscal conservatism, the idea of character, separation of powers, small government, free markets, free men, all of those things. But that old Republican Party that you used to be in charge of, it's never coming back, is it?
No, it's not. And it's, you can say, yeah, it's unfortunate, and what's unfortunate is the way it met its demise. by its own hand, effectively. It took itself out, which is why, you know, as a young man growing up in Washington, D.C., and you really haven't lived, folks, until you've been a black Roman Catholic conservative from Washington, D.C. Oh, the fun I had. The rooms I could get into. But you know, you don't, for me, it really boiled down to an idea. And it's why I always refer to myself as a Lincoln Republican, because it was the idea of the formation of the party, the idea of why the party was the resistance to slavery when the movement in the country was towards compromise. And these ragtag, you know, members of the Whig Party said, no, the words on the parchment says we're all equal, we're all free, and we can't enslave people. And so that idea of individual liberty and individual freedom stuck with me as a young 17, 18-year-old kid. And my mama, who was a Democrat, thought herself noble and said to me, as I was approaching the election of 1776, 1976.
I remember it well.
I remember it well. 1976, don't be a Democrat because I'm a Democrat. Don't be a Democrat because your daddy's a Democrat. And, you know, just go out and learn for yourself. Learn about the parties. Learn who you are. And I did. So when I came back and told her I'd registered as a Republican, she said, why the hell did you do that? I was like, because you told me to go out and find myself. And I found myself in that Republican Party, warts and all. The party that always stood for the civil liberties, fought for the civil rights of the American people, not just African Americans, but for all Americans. That party, that iteration of the party is gone. So it requires a different work, a new work from all of us. I remain a Republican for a number of reasons. The first, because it pisses the rest of them off, right? They hate the fact that I'm a Republican, because every time I say something, I'm saying it as a Republican. So when I speak about Mike Johnson, I'm like, well, as a member of the Republican Party, Mr. Speaker, I have a problem with what you're doing, right? And the reason is you need those voices, even though I no longer hold elective office, you need those voices within the party itself to declare what is going on, what it is doing is wrong. And you can't do that. And I've had this debate with my friend Joe Walsh and my buddy Joe Scarborough and many other Republicans who've left, that the fight has to remain inside the tent. Because it's easy to get out and scream and shout at Republicans. But it stings when you are one. It cuts when you're in the same fight. Now, yeah, there's a lot of blowback from that. People go, why are you still, you're part of the problem. No, I'm trying to fix the problem, and a lot of us are trying to fix the problem. That's what our Republican
Is that problem ever going to be fixed?
No, I don't think.
In our lifetime? Because I'm not seeing it. Marco Rubio is not the future.
No, he's not
the future.
Was. No, he's not the future. That moment occurred when he was on Time magazine and he said he was, whatever he said, that was
GOP's savior.
Right, that was the end of that when that happened. That's just the way it goes. But no, it's not. But what my point is that there are Republicans out there. I just mentioned our Republican legacy. John Danforth, Governor Roscoe, myself, Chris, I'm blanking on Chris's name. Vance. I've got so many Chris's. Chris Vance. All of these folks who are out here pushing the Republican principles that align with our first principles, right? About who we are and how we will govern ourselves politically. and it would, through the strength of the rule of law, through the freedom that comes from economic prosperity and opportunity, for reaffirming our alliances abroad. These principles, these ideas, these pillars still matter. They may not be housed in this broken shell of a once proud Republican Party. I'm good with that, because they reside here, and they come out here every day. And the goal for each one of us who still align ourselves as Republican is to respond and to articulate that idea, that principle, those principles, so others hear them and align themselves to them. And that alignment will lead, I hope, through the efforts of many, to either something outside of this shell of a party, or reigniting something within it. But that's the fight down the road. Right now, we've got to get good people elected in 2026 who turn back the authoritarian push of this administration and these Republicans in the House. The fewer of them in the House, the better, right? That's our reality. That's just the reality. If they keep the majority, Donald Trump does worse in the next 2 years. So there are a lot of political calculations that have to be made that cut against the grain of what has been normal for many folks, what's been acceptable to many people. You're no longer in that safe space, folks. Sorry. This is not the moment for you to be comfortable. We're not here to put, a nice little pair of booties on your feet and give you a drink every evening and you can relax. No, there's a lot of work that you need to get up off your butt and do. And there are going to be a lot of choices that each one of you are going to have to make that go counter to what you think are core beliefs, but they're not. They're consistent, because what that means is you're trying to move off of things that are weighing down those beliefs and making it harder for you to achieve the American dream for your family, for your community, and for your country. We've got to pull together here. We can no longer hang our hat on a label and think we're done, because that's not how work works.
Well, I'm a lot less optimistic than you are about the future of the Republican Party. I don't see it. It is so thoroughly corrupted. On the other hand, I do think that there's going to be a moment where many of these principles you're talking about will appear to be fresh. Young people who are experiencing this and, are now, so that's what the balance of powers was all about. That's why checks and balances are significant. I hadn't really thought about due process before. How do you think people feel now about, free markets as opposed to imposing taxes by presidential whim? Even our progressive friends, we might have an interesting conversation. What do you think about the 9th and 10th Amendments right now?
Right.
Maybe now we could have a conversation about why, government that's closest to the people often governs best, why we have a federal system with state sovereignty. But also I think that it is important for us to realize that, and I think I said this when I was here 2 years ago. Look, one of the problems of our politics is we have become so segmented, and I'm not going to dwell on this. We're in these bubbles. We are in these alternative reality silos, and that the important thing is to continue to learn to be able to talk to people who have, different politics, but will share the same values. And what this means is that we all don't have to sort of put on the motley and become progressive Democrats in order to resist this. We need to be able to talk to people in places like Michigan and Minnesota and my home state of Wisconsin and say, we don't expect that you're going to change your values overnight. We're not going to expect that you're suddenly going to decide that you're going to vote for every single Democrat, although they need to this year. The conversations that I think are the most powerful are the ones that say, okay, here are the principles that unite us. Here, the patriotism, the decency, and all of these things, and these are fundamental. And I will say, and because actually Michael and I have this tag team riff here, and he's going to be great. One of the things that frustrates me are the number of folks let's be honest, I mean, Democrats or progressives, who think that, all Republicans were always racist and everything that's happening now was an inevitable result of everything that was happening. And I try to say, okay, there were many, many mistakes. There were many blind spots. There are many things that we did that we need to confront. On the other hand, it is crucial to say to our moderate and our conservative brethren that what you're seeing from Donald Trump is neither conservatism nor anything consistent with normal politics. And so I will always read Ronald Reagan's farewell address when he said, I talk about America as a shining city on a hill. And what do I mean? I mean a city that's teeming with commerce. I don't have the exact text in front of me. Teeming with commerce. And if it must have walls, it has to have doors that are open and welcome everyone, who wants to come here and work and thrive. And the challenge is to people to say, can you imagine any current Republican saying what Ronald Reagan did? So when people say, I'm not going to deal with you people because you were once Republicans and everything is evil from Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan had a vision of America as the shining city on the hill with walls, but with huge doors. And I think that that's one of those shared values that might actually be fresh for people who are looking at these politics and looking for where do we go from here.
I agree with that, and I love, that's one of my favorite narratives from President Reagan is this idea of this country as a shining city on the hill.
Preach the light, Brother Michael.
Well, and that's the thing about it is, as I reflected on that as a young man, and Charlie and I have had these conversations over the years, and even as recently as yesterday. Have you ever stopped and thought about that city on a hill and why it's so attractive to the rest of the world? It's because of the light in the city. The light that comes from the city. How else do you see the city, right? It's lit up. What is that light? The light is you. We're the light in that city on the hill. We're the beacon that the world sees. And right now, we have an administration that's trying to put that light out. Trying to put you out. Your values, the things you love, the people you love, the communities you're from. They're trying to tell the rest of the world it's not worth it. And I'm going to tell you, because you are the light, you have to not hide it, hang it higher. You need to shine it brighter. Because that's the only way we move forward. The light is there to lead us forward, not to look backwards. And so be the light in the city on the hill. Continue to show the world who we are, why we are, what we are. And invite them, because they're coming. They've always been coming. Since 1619, they've been coming. And it doesn't even matter anymore how we got here. We're all here. And we got to work this ish out. Otherwise, we put the light out.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Go for it. I don't think we depressed them.
Thank you much.